All right, students, welcome back. Welcome. If you guys haven't been with us before, I am Chase. I will be your host / teacher for the evening. When you guys get into class today, or when you guys see this live stream, can everybody give me a thumbs up? Let me know that you guys are here, and then we'll get going. Just to remind everybody, this is the SAT Comprehensive Review that we'll be doing tonight. It will be covering every section of the SAT exam, as well as as well as the scoring, the scale. We'll be covering pretty much all of it, and we'll be able to answer any general questions that you guys have related to related to everything, frankly, right? We'll be starting with the scale, the score, all that kind of stuff today. And in the meantime, guys, when you're getting to class, can everybody give me a thumbs up in the chat or below the video, just so we know you're here, as well as or a hello maybe in the chat, just so we can address you if you guys have any questions going forward. Okay? And we'll get started here in just a second. Guys, for today's class, if you guys all, I think I posted this. Let me see. Somebody post this? I don't know if we did. We'll be working with SAT Test 6 and the scoring for SAT Test 6. So that's the test form we'll be using tonight. SAT Test 6. Hey Bob, welcome. So guys, those two links I just posted, hey Veronica, welcome. The two links I just posted, everybody, those are the two links that we'll be using for tonight's live stream, SAT test number 6, as well as the scoring for SAT test 6. So go ahead and click open those links. If you guys have your big blue SAT practice guidebook, you guys can use that as well. A few things to remind you of, or a few things that I want you guys to do. There's a couple, so I posted this earlier, but we are very adamant. We'll talk about this tonight and then tomorrow during our hype video, which is another thing to add on to this. But we're very adamant that you guys do some warm-up practice problems before you get started. And we have created a Star U app, right? Our Star U app creates all of the things or gives you information on all the things that you're going to see on Saturday. But more importantly, what it allows you to do is it allows you to do practice problems on your phone before you start the exam on Saturday. So I highly encourage everybody to download the app if you haven't already. Download Star U. I posted the information in the live chat as well. So download Star U and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, especially if you find tonight's lesson helpful. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and hopefully spread the news to your friends. We'd like to be doing this full time. We have a lot more content that we can cover on the YouTube channel, but we ultimately just need more and more subscribers in order to do that. Okay, and the final thing that I want to bring up, tomorrow we do have our SAT hype video. Hey guys, welcome. If you guys are just getting into class tonight, welcome. Okay, we'll be going through this comprehensive SAT review, as I mentioned. We're going to use test number 6, test form 6. So if you guys have the hard copy and the big practice guidebook, you guys can use that. If not, you can also use the link that I just posted. Go ahead and use that. We're going to use test number 6. So let us know when you're in. Guys, before we get started, any general questions about the SAT? And once again, if you're just joining us, make sure you give us a thumbs up or a hello so that we know who's here and can address you guys. But before we get going, any general questions about this exam? Any general questions? If not, for those that are ready to go, if you guys are here, hey guys, Giovanna, Jose, welcome. Envir, welcome guys. Welcome to everybody joining us. Any general questions, go ahead and post those. Anna, welcome. We're really going to be doing this comprehensive review in a way, hopefully, that gives you guys an opportunity to see every aspect of this exam, particularly for Saturday. But don't forget, every one of these videos, guys, is posted to our YouTube channel as soon as we're done. So it should give you guys the opportunity to watch this again if you ever have any questions, if you ever want to go over it. And we'll also be doing these videos going forward before every SAT exam. Yeah, Anna, so good question. So in terms of the SAT and the ACT, there is about 80% crossover between the two tests. The ACT, obviously, the biggest difference is the timing. The SAT has 154 questions, and the ACT has 215 questions. So a 30% jump, right? Or no, 50% jump from the SAT to the ACT in terms of number of questions. But they are about the same amount of time. So basically, the SAT gives you harder, more analytical, evidence-based questions on every section of the test. You see this a lot on the math section and on the reading section. The reading section, in particular on the SAT, is much more dense. The passages are harder, the questions are harder. And then on the math, there's a lot more word problems on the SAT than there are on the ACT, less straightforward concept review, and more kind of how does this work kind of question. But other than that, there is still 80% crossover between the exams, and it really comes down to just preference. But if you're making a switch from one exam to the next, or vice versa, there's not, don't go into it thinking you're starting at zero. If you've done all the work necessary for the SAT, you're going in at, let's call it the 75% mark for the ACT in terms of learning the general content. Is that cool? Good question, though, overall. Good question. Okay, guys, any other general questions about the test? If you're just joining us, like I said, yeah, so Ranbir, that's a good point, right? The free mind thing. I'm actually super glad that you brought that up, because the free mind, right, is a huge part of this. Let me ask you this: if you got an 800, obviously that's in the top 0.1%, Ranbir. The whole everybody that takes this test, you would be scoring equally as well as the top 50 kids out of 2 million. So that's an unbelievable accomplishment in itself. But just ask yourself, right? The free mind thing that you just brought up is a huge part of it, for sure. Because when you sit down and take the math test, if you're getting an 800, you're not really thinking about it, right? You're not worried about it. Maybe you miss one question. Maybe there's one or two difficult questions on the whole math section. But if you can score an 800 or a 750 plus score on the math, you don't go into it being like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And that's what allows you to perform at your absolute peak. Now, the key is, and the trick is if we take a step back and we say, well, the English or the reading section is not my best section, or writing and language is not my best section, then am I going to approach it in the same way that I approach it for math? The answer should be yes. But of course, all of us know that when we do anything that we feel a little bit less comfortable with, we don't tend to perform as well, right? And that's not even about concept review. Think about that in anything you do in life. You guys don't think about, you generally don't, nobody thinks about, walking to the end of the block or whatever it might be, whatever the task is. Things that just come completely easy to us, we never think about. And that allows us to perform without ever, right, in relatively efficient manner. And that's what we have to try to do. So you're 100% right. You've kind of hit the nail on the head. You've already kind of solved your own problem in that, is that you've crammed for English. That's a huge part of it, because we'll talk a lot about how important the grammar rules are tonight. But beyond that, it's a lot about going in and just having confidence in yourself and being ready to go on test day. And you've kind of, again, already identified that. Good question, Veronica. They're pretty comparable. So, yeah, pretty comparable. 33 on a 1420. There's actually concordance table. Let me send this to you guys. You guys are ever wondering if you're taking both tests? Give me 1 second. Yeah, so Veronica, I just posted that. Ranbir, no problem. Yeah, that post there, but 14, 20, and 33 are pretty comparable. I would say that the 33 is a little bit higher, but only slightly. Like maybe 1450 to 1470 is closer to a 33, maybe a 1480, somewhere in there. So you might be a little bit higher on the ACT, but those are obviously really, really strong scores and relatively comparable. Good question. Guys, yeah, tonight we're going to be going through all of the kind of a comprehensive review of both the SAT scale as well as the SAT, each individual section of the SAT. So hang tight. We'll be getting onto that in just a second. If you're just joining us, please make sure that you give a thumbs up or a hello in the chat so we know that you're here and ready to go. And then we'll get started here. We'll start with the SAT Test 6 scale. So we're SAT Test number 6, the scale for that. And we'll go through that. We'll go through, and let me see if I can find it. Guys, if you scroll up in the chat, or even better yet, if you pin the message at the top. And one final thing, guys, if you're interested in joining our membership program, I highly encourage you to do it. We just came up with a silver member level, right, which is $3 per month. And I'm obviously not here to encourage you guys to pay for anything, and that's not the goal of tonight. We're obviously giving this whole comprehensive review away for free. But if you guys are interested, we're going to start offering little things. So for $3 a month, you'll get, kind of exclusive live streams. I hope that the cost is not prohibitive for anybody at that $3 mark. There are other levels of the membership that you guys can look at that will give you a full recording. So the gold membership, if you're interested, is a full 20-hour program with me teaching the class. All materials are included, and that's $30 if you want to be a gold member. But I encourage you guys to check it out. At least the silver level, the $3 a month, we'll do a live. We're going to do a kind of a day before test pep talk tomorrow afternoon for all YouTube members on our channel. And if you guys are interested in that, I encourage you to check it out. It'll give you some perks and some things that maybe the normal subscriber doesn't get. And if not, don't worry about it. We'll still provide a lot of this free content as well, and continue to do what we've been doing over the last 18 months or so. Okay, but yeah, in any case, I encourage you guys to check it out if and when you have time. And guys, by the way, to see that, if you are interested in the membership program at all, you guys can click that join button below. It's also in the video description below this. So you guys can either click the join button and read about the different levels of that perk, or you guys can, it's in the video description as well, as if you guys, again, have any interest in our membership program. All right, can everybody give me one final before we get started here? So I'll remind you guys of all the Star U stuff as we get closer, as well as the membership program, all that stuff. But can everybody give me a good to go in the chat? If you guys can say good to go in the chat, or give me 2 thumbs up in the chat if you'd rather. 2 thumbs up in the chat, and we will get started here with SAT Test 6 scoring in the scale. And I'm hopeful that what I do today, at least in this first 15-20 minutes, is give you guys an opportunity to learn from, or to listen, to learn about how to approach this test that maybe takes a little bit of that stress and pressure away. And if we can do that, if we can take the stress and pressure away, on Ranveer's point earlier, I think that's going to take a lot of stress, and it's going to only increase your score when you go in with that free mind. That's a good way to put it. All right, guys, we'll get started here in just a second then. Everybody feeling comfortable, ready to go here? Cool, thanks, guys. Giovanna, great. Everybody else good? All right, so let's take a look at this. So we're going to look at SAT test number 6, the scale and scoring. This is a side note, but if you guys are ever looking for kind of what we call like a middle of the road scale on the SAT exam, test number 6 is a great one to take a look at. So in the background of my screen, and if you guys want to follow along, you guys can click the link at the top of the chat. I posted that link. But here right now, we're looking at SAT test number 6. And specifically, we're looking at the scale and the scoring. SAT Test 6, scale. Okay, the scale and scoring. I am a huge believer, guys, that if you don't understand how this test is formatted, you're already going in at a disadvantage to other students. Okay, and it's so easy to understand how this test is formatted. We just need to go in and approach it in a way that if I understand the scoring, okay, how am I going to apply that on test day? Right? How am I going to maximize my test score? How am I going to go in with this free mind, this free thought? And I think that if you approach it this way, you'll find that you are taking the test, right? You're letting the test come to you. You're not feeling overwhelmed at any given moment. So let me just remind you, okay, that everybody always says, right? Everybody always talks about the scoring, right? Everybody always wants to get a certain score. We'll remember, right, that the reading section is out of 400 points, right? The writing and language section is also out of 400 points. Those two sections added, right? They add together, and we are left with what we would call like an RWL score of 800. And so anytime you guys are looking at a scale for the SAT, you can just apply it by, right, it's so dumb that they do this. They make you multiply by 10 down here anyway. I have no idea why they don't just call this, right, each of these scales, right, is 370, 370. And even for exceptionally strong scores on this test, understanding the scale is something that seems to slip through the cracks. It seems to be something that nobody thinks about. Yet it's one of the most, the first 15 to 30 minutes of this video is going to be the most important part of the video. Nothing that we do in terms of concept review here going forward, that's not going to be nearly as important as what we're looking at right here. Okay, so again, 800 for the RWL. And then we'll remember that the math section, right, the no calc has 20 questions. Right, no calc has 20, calc has 38, which is a total of 58. Okay, and I would encourage, even for high-level students that feel like they know everything about the SAT, I would still encourage you to write all this stuff down. So 58, right, corresponds to an 800 points, right? The thing that every student in the world that I've ever dealt with, at least at the beginning, right, or 99.9999% of the students that we've ever worked with, always think about this number. Is that fair? If you're a student, probably everybody, hopefully, because I don't want to be wrong with my stat, right? But how many of you guys think about the score? And how often does that make us feel overwhelmed? Like, oh, I got to get this score to get into Harvard. I got to get in this score to get at this scholarship, whatever, right? How many of you think about the score and that makes you feel overwhelmed? Can you guys give me a I do or a thumbs up in the chat if that's you? If you feel like, oh man, that's totally me. I feel so overwhelmed when I'm talking about scoring. Who's in that boat? And guys, I want you to know that you're not alone. That's a very common thought and thread for most students. But most importantly, it's something that's easily overcome if we just slightly tweak our mindset. Okay, it's just something. It's so easily overcome if we just slightly tweak our mindset, and that's what we're going to work on tonight. Okay, so Veronica, give me, or anybody, Jose, anybody who's here, if anybody feels comfortable giving me what your goal score would be, right? If any of you feel comfortable with that, I'd really appreciate it. Just to use you as an example, it will actually help you because we're talking about that score specifically. If anybody feels comfortable sharing their score, like their goal score, and it can be anything, and it can be not necessarily what it is now, but what you want it to be. Okay. If you feel comfortable sharing that, then we can talk about somebody very specifically, and you guys can follow along in that way. But the reason that everybody feels uncomfortable with that is because you've never done. Who in the world has ever talked about a score on a 1600 scale before? Okay, so Veronica, perfect. So right, let's talk about a 1550. And just to make it easier so that there's not a split, Veronica, I'm going to say 1500, okay? And that may just take a little bit of your more pressure off. But that's an exceptionally high score. And Veronica, if you feel, right, if you start thinking in the terms of like, how do I get a 1500 on this test? That's going to feel overwhelming because that's not applicable to anything. It doesn't feel like anything we've ever done before because you've never been graded on a 1600 scale before. So 1500 just seems like this abstract number that nobody really can relate to. And we have to take that away from this. We have to remove the 1600 and the points available. We got to remove that from the equation altogether and only think about the questions. Okay, so Veronica, let's say you're going to try for 1500, just again to make it easier on me. Okay, in that 1500, which of those would you say it's going to be equal probably between the two sections of the test, or the two, right, math and reading and writing? If we're trying to get a 1500, which guys is an exceptionally strong score. But if you could and we're going to use Veronica as an example here, and we'll try to throw in some things if you're looking at a different score level. But a 1500, we got to correspond that, and I want everybody to write this down. This is the secret to the, okay? This is the secret to the SAT. Okay, this is the secret to the SAT right here. is that if you get 1,500, what does that actually mean in terms of number of questions on each section of the test? Right? What does that actually mean? Well, really, realistically, right, let's just say, I have no idea, Veronica, I don't know which of your scores is better typically, but let's say that you want to get a 740 on the math section, okay? It might flip, right? And if you want to get a 740, that means you got to get a 760 on the reading, writing, and language sections, okay? If we look at this, guys, right, and you think about that, and we need to know how we can get to a 760 on those, that means we need to average, right, 380 on these other two sections. So let's set this very definitively. And this is how everybody should approach this. That, Veronica, going into the test on Saturday, don't think about, well, how am I going to get this score, right? Or for anybody, and we'll go through this again at another scoring level. Think about how many questions you need to get right. Okay, so how great is this, right? How beautiful is this that when we say this, if you get 53 out of 58 questions right on this test, 53 out of 58 in school, right? In school, that would be equivalent to, like, let's call it just to make it easy, 91%. It's probably a little bit higher than that if you did it on your calculator. But it's a 91%. Let's call that an A minus. A 740 on this test and a 1,500 is in the top 1% of all students that take this. So the reason I bring this up, right, is a 740 is equivalent to the top 1% of all students. And that makes us feel, that alone makes us feel overwhelmed. But if I told you on a math final that you could actually study for, that you could skip the 5 hardest questions and never look at those, ever, and I'd still give you a 99%, how many of you guys would take that? Can I see 2 thumbs up in the chat if you guys would take that? That I'd tell you to skip the hardest 5 questions. Don't even do them. Imagine if I was your math teacher and I was just like, you know what? Here are 58 questions for you. I don't even care if you do the hardest 5 questions on the test. You don't have to do them at all. Don't do them. I'll give you a top 1, I'll give you a 99% on the math final. Everybody in the world would be like, what's wrong with the teacher today? Right? That's it. That is what the SAT is asking you to do. All right? That is what the SAT is asking you to do. So think about this, right? 99%. If you skip the 5 hardest questions, skip 5 hardest questions. Okay, I'm using Veronica as another example here, but because that's such an elite level score at 1,500, and we'll talk about what it's like to get a 600, right, instead of a 750 or 650. But again, Veronica, imagine if you go into the test on Saturday on the math section, and instead of feeling overwhelmed, you sit there and you think, nobody has ever asked in the history of this program, in the history of every student I've ever. Okay, so Veronica, this is going to hit home, right? If you want to improve on your math score, then maybe instead of 740, you're looking at 760, but you get the picture, right? I honestly think that, Veronica, if you take this strategy in, don't ever go into the test thinking about an 800. If it happens, it happens. But if you're capable of getting an 800, you should think about getting 20 points lower. You should think about a 780. And the reason that's so important, right, and this is to everybody, and it works at every level of the test, even if you're already at an 800, that you go into the test, even at the most elite level, thinking, okay, I can skip 2 questions and still get a 780, and I'm happy with that. If I get a 780 on both sections, that's a 1560 overall. And other than a pride thing, let me just tell you that 1560, Harvard came out with a study that said the number of applicants between 1560 and 1600, it was actually 1550 and 1600, right? And I think the number was 34 to 36. And this is at Harvard, the highest, right, the strongest institution in the world. Okay, there was no difference in numbers between how many students were admitted with this score versus this score, or this score versus this score. So the reason I bring all that up is because other than pride, yeah, it might be great to get a perfect score. If you're looking at even the most elite institutions in the country, you shouldn't worry if you're getting a 780 versus an 800, and that takes away the 2 hardest questions on the test for you or for whoever that might be. If you're looking at a 740, right, that takes away the 5 hardest questions. You can skip 5 questions and still be good to go. You're not worried about, oh my gosh, I'm going to do so badly on this test. My parents are going to be so mad at me, right? All that stuff, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all, right? That's not to discount it anyway, but it's to say, man, I can do this. And even if I don't know every single question on the test, I can get an exceptionally high score and still not worry. Yeah, guys, in terms of individual practice sections, we're going to get into each section of the test because it is the comprehensive review before May. So any questions related to specific sections, we're going to do it in. We'll get to everything by the end of the lesson tonight. We're going to take each individual section, but I just want everybody to be aware of this stuff first. So Veronica, can everybody kind of in that level of testing give me a thumbs up to see that makes sense? Now, if you're testing a little bit slightly lower, right, I want everybody to remember that a 650 on this test, and especially for those that are in competitive areas in the country, right, or a competitive area in the world, if you go to a great school, everybody always is talking about it. Oh, I got this score, right? Don't worry about that. You can't control that. What you can control is how many questions you get right on the test. That's it. That's all you have to worry about. Don't worry about what everybody else says. And look what happens, guys. If you want to get a 650 on this math section, which, by the way, is in the top 10%, right? This is in the top 10% of all students. If you get a 650, you're in the top 10%. You have to get 43 questions right. 43 questions right out of 58. 43 out of 58. Guys, that's skipping the 15 hardest questions. Skip 15 questions, and you get a top 10% score. This right here, right? If you get a 43 out of 58, you're talking about a, 75% or so, maybe a little bit lower than that. Yet on this test, I just told you that you got a 90% just for sitting down. You sit down and you get a 90%. You get a 15% bump just to be there, just to be awake. Imagine if you heard that. In school, imagine if your math teacher told you, you know what, here's a 58 question test. I only expect you to get 75% of the questions right, and if you do that, I'll give you a 90%. I'll give you an A- on the final, and you can be on your way. You can have a great summer. Again, going back to this idea of who wouldn't take that? Everybody in the world would take that trade-off, right? And that's how we have to approach this. We have to approach it in a way that all of you guys are familiar with. Nobody here is familiar with a 1600 scale before the freshman year of high school. You may have heard about it. Some of you may have even taken a practice test in middle school, right, and gone through the middle school practice test. We've seen students take those. But relatively speaking, when you're in 7th grade, you're not thinking about the SAT score, right? It's just you're sitting down to take a test, and then you get a score, and then it's kind of out the window. So nobody is thinking about a 1600 score until maybe late freshman year of high school. Maybe a little bit earlier, but we're splitting hairs at that point. Okay, what we're really trying to think about here is how do we improve? What metric do I need to do to improve my score? And it's a very easy metric to see. Every single question on the SAT, one question, right, is equivalent to 10 points. Almost all the way through the test at every level, right, one question is equivalent to 10 points. So Veronica, a really easy way to stress yourself out on Saturday is to say, I got to get an 800. I got a 740, so now I got to get an 800. Right? That's a really, really easy way to stress yourself out. Instead of saying that, why wouldn't you say, and this again, looking at the scale, hey, if I get a 740 right now, and I get one more question right, that 740 jumps to a 760, my score jumps 20 points. Again, that's ironic because I said every question is worth 10 points, and on average it is worth 10 points. If you don't believe me, there's 154 questions. Whoops, that's not a cue. There's 154 questions on the SAT. There's 1,600 points available. Right, some simple quick math. That's roughly 10 points per question. Okay? So instead of going in, guys, and thinking, how do I go from a 740 to an 800, or how do I go from a 600 to a 700, you think about it as, how do I answer one more question right? I'm still going to skip 4. I'm going to skip the 4 hardest questions on the test because I don't know how to do those. And as soon as I see them, if I already know I can score a 740 on the math section, then I'm a great math student. That is unequivocal. That's undeniable. I'm a great math student. So if you're sitting there thinking, man, these 4 or 5 questions are pretty hard, guess what? They are really hard because you're a great math student and you find them to be hard. They are hard. So move on from those 4 or 5 questions and then find all the other easy ones. And then if you have time at the end, of course, come back to the hard ones. Right? Don't take a nap. But don't do those. Don't lose your momentum just because you're wanting to do this in order. There's no reason to do that when every question is worth the same value. Okay, guys, does that all make sense? And again, it applies at every level of the test. We're going to get into the SAT reading section here in just a second. We're going to get into the SAT reading section here in just a second, but can everybody give me a thumbs up or something if that all makes sense? You good with that, guys? Again, you guys can give me a thumbs up in the chat if you're great. Perfect. Okay, great, guys. Thanks. Okay? So if that makes sense, just apply it to your own score. I was obviously using Veronica there because she was the first to give us her goal score, but just use your own score. If you're trying to get a 600, go into Saturday's test knowing that you have to answer 38 questions and use this test 6 scale as your beacon, right? As your beacon of light to show you, because the test 6 scale is a pretty reasonable score. It's not too easy, right, where you just lose points out of nowhere, right? It's not too easy. Simple mistakes don't cost you too badly on the test 6, and it's also not too hard where where the scale is a little bit too much in your favor. So, like test number 8, math on test number 8 of the SAT Blue Book would be that type of test scale. So great question about the math calculator. 22 through 30 gets really, really hard. And when you step up to those free responses, there's actually an even bigger benefit to going to the free response math stuff first. And we'll get there, but as long as this question is being asked regarding the free response, don't forget, guys, that it's like those old infomercials, right? It's like those old infomercials. And there's more. I cannot stress to you guys enough that on the math section, every question is multiple choice with the exception of just a few. So to the point that was just made in the chat, right, this is another step up in terms of the math. Okay? Yeah, they differ, but by 1 or 2 questions. So guys, that's why I'm using test 6 as the scale. Everybody's always very concerned with what the scale is going to look like. If you guys just keep using this test form number 6 scale, you can search it, just say test 6 scoring on Google. This is a pretty reasonable scale, right? Where every single math question is minus 10 points, right, for quite a while, and then you might pick up one from 670, but this is a very reasonable scale. So it varies from every test, one test to the next, of course, but it's very, very reasonable to use test number 6 going forward, and that's why we use it in these reviews. But it's going to change from one test to the next. You don't know what that's going to be, so it's better not to think about it at all. And just set your goal expectations on test number 6. In that case, we want a really hard test, because if you hit your goal number of questions on a hard test, your score is actually going to be higher than what it would be on test number 6. But don't forget, guys, to this point about the math section, okay? If you look at this, right, look at this. Look at what we see here. These are all multiple choice questions. I know everybody knows that, but it's amazing how little we think about that when it relates to strategy and momentum and all that kind of stuff. These are not multiple choice, okay? 31 through 38. And I know all you guys understand that. But what's the one thing we can't do on a non-multiple choice question? It's not a trick question. It should be relatively straightforward. But who has the answer to that? What can't we do? Why might it be a good idea on the no calc section to go 1 through 10, right? And then jump to the free response and go 16 through 20, and then look at 11 through 15, still remembering to skip questions if necessary. Right? Why would it be beneficial on the no calc section or on the calculator section? You go 1 through 20, right? Then 31 through 38, and then 21 through 30. Why would it be beneficial to do that? You can guess, right? That's perfect. On all of these questions, you can guess. You're relatively speaking, you're never going to guess one of those questions right. Okay? And the difficulty resets. Perfect. From a momentum standpoint, Jesse's exactly right. From a momentum standpoint, 31, right? Number 31 is going to set off an easy question again. So if you're struggling, if you're finding yourself getting out of this momentum because you can't figure out a certain question, move on and go to the free response questions because there's going to be easy ones there that are going to get you back into that momentum, into that rhythm. And then on top of it all, you can guess. You're going to pick up a few points. If you guess the same letter down on any given test, you're going to pick up some points. So let's say we guess on this one, we can pick up any of these 4, right? If you guys skipped the last 8 questions, right, but you got every other question right, you get 30 out of 38. Okay, 30 out of 38, right, which is equivalent, whatever. And then if you guess the same letter down on those hard questions, if you save them all to multiple choice, you get 32 out of 38. If you guess just guess A all the way down, right? You get 1, 2 A's. 32 out of 38. Let's go back down to our sheet. 32 out of 38 would be -6, and you probably missed 3 on the no calc section because they're about half of as many problems. You missed 9 questions. 49 would be a 700. By skipping 8 questions, you'd end up with a 700 on the test if you skipped 8 questions on the calculator test and used a guessing letter. Okay, and use the guessing letter the rest of the way, you'd get 700, and you'd skip 8 questions on the calculator test. That's awesome, right? That is awesome news for everybody that wants to take this, right? That's awesome news for everybody that wants to take this. Okay. Any other questions about this section of the exam? I mean, about the scale. I guess it's not this section, but just about the scale, guys. Any other questions about the scale? Then we're going to move on to the SAT reading section. And of course, SAT reading, guys, is one that's particularly difficult, as many of you guys know. Okay, so can everybody give me a thumbs up, and then I'll repost this if you guys are interested in the. Okay, so we're going to open up test number 6. We're going to actually open up the real test form for test 6 rather than the scoring, and we're going to go through each section of the exam. Okay, going to have to go through each section of the exam. So you guys can see test number 6 is now pinned to the top of the page. Energy drinks are allowed. I don't encourage you to take an energy drink unless you take them regularly. If you do, then I think it's fine. But you're going to get jittery. It's hard to focus when you're overstimulated. If your brain is like it's going crazy, it's hard to focus. But if you regularly take energy drinks, then I think it's totally fine. And yes, they are allowed. There are certain points when you can take them. You can't just be sipping on it. You can't be sipping an energy drink during the exam, but you can take it during the breaks or take it before the exam starts. You can only have water on your desk, technically. Some proctors don't care, but you can only have water on your desk, technically. So just something to think about. Yeah, then you're good. If you've been practicing with them and you're familiar with that, then totally, you could definitely use an energy drink. Absolutely. I think that's totally fine. All right, guys, so let's look at this practice test. Let's look at SAT test number 6. I'm going to pull it up in the background of my screen. We're going to look at the reading section first. Okay, look at the reading section first. Okay, and sorry, guys. For those that didn't know this already, the reading section of the SAT exam is very difficult. It's the hardest section, and so we got to do on the reading section in particular. There is so much strategy involved because the actual element of the test, right? There's not a lot of content review you need going in. So obviously, being a better reader is huge, but that's not content, right? You're not reviewing the same content over and over like you are in math or writing and language. Reading is far more about strategizing and how do we strategize best to get the maximum score. I'd recommend trying to relax a little bit tomorrow, guys. Like I said, we're gonna have that hype video if anybody's interested for our class, for our members, for our channel members. We're gonna have one video. We're gonna just answer general questions But if anybody's interested. I should say that this is only for the channel. It's only going to be 30 minutes, but it is a live stream. You guys want to join. But otherwise, if you're not, you can briefly get fired up for the test and do some things and a little bit of review here and there. But generally speaking, I would try to keep it to a minimum, just so that you're not, then you start overthinking it a bit, and that's what we want to try to avoid. On top of that, guys, I'm going to post 2 other things, and then we're going to talk. Here's SAT test number 6. This is the reading section that we're going to cover today, or cover right now, rather. So if you guys want to take some notes on just things that I think are super important to think about going into Saturday, right? SAT test 6. Okay, reading, always section number 1. All right, so here's the thing about the SAT, is that unfortunately for anybody that's taking the SAT and not the ACT, you start off with the hardest single section by far, and it's represented in the scale, it's represented in how we feel typically coming out of the reading section. If you're a great natural reader, that's awesome because you have a leg up because this is a really hard section. But this is a really hard test just in general, right? The reading section is a hard section test, and we have to do everything in our power to be ready to go when we sit down to start the reading test. I cannot tell you how often on practice tests that we get sent from students, how often students will miss a significant number of the first passage that they read solely because you're just not woken up, right? You're not thinking about the reading section. You're not doing what you need to do prior to starting the exam. So you're just kind of like, what am I doing, right? I don't want to be here, blah, 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 right? And then it takes you a little bit to get into the right rhythm. When you do, you start to pick up points. But whenever we see somebody miss like 5 out of the first 11 questions, all the reading questions, and then they get the next 25 in a row right, it tells us right away that that's just an issue with being focused early on in the test, and we have to try to avoid that. Yeah, so Spitty just kind of said exactly right. We're on the same page. I can't tell you that you're not alone. I can tell you that you're not alone, and I can't tell you how often we see. I can't tell you how often we see students just miss a bunch of questions at the beginning of the test, and it's largely. Sometimes it has to do with the passages and like the passage order, but that's so easy, right? Right? That's so easy to change. You can just change the passage order. So very, very rarely is that truly the issue. Most of the time, the issue is just not being in the right mindset going into it. Yeah, Veronica, the ACT reading is so much easier. The passages are easier. The questions are easier. You just have to do it in a lot shorter time, and that's kind of the ACT in general. The SAT gives you plenty of time, but it is really hard to stay focused. So before we even get going with strategy and all that for what you're doing during the test on the SAT reading stuff, okay, yeah, and so same thing on the flip side, right? We'll talk about what to do at the end of the test because the same simple mistakes that happen at the end of the test are either due to timing, typically, that can be a big one, rushing through the end, right? Or due to just fatigue, right? You're just like tired of looking at reading passages, so your mind just naturally kind of goes and it just goes, right? And then you have time to relax and rest after the reading section before you start the next one so you can kind of regroup. But at the end of the reading test, it's hard to stay focused. So we got to come up with ways, and we have, and we'll share those with you, right? We've got to come up with ways, though, to combat that in whatever way we can. But the most important thing you guys can be doing, and this is where I bring up our Star U app so often. So if you guys haven't created a student account, this is 100% free, right? You can download, and I'll pull it up on my screen as well. It's free. And this, guys, by the way, this app is so important and I'll show you guys this too. You guys create a free student account. Again, it takes like 2 seconds. It's free. But what you guys are going to see when you log into the app is not only really, really easy practice on your phone when you're getting ready, so the warm-up aspect of this, but you're going to see every grammar rule. When we talk about the writing and language section here in a second, you'll see every grammar rule that could possibly be seen on the SAT over the last 4 years. Every single one that we've ever seen is also in the app. That's free as well. So we highly encourage you guys to download this and create a student account. Cool. Yeah, Brown, that's great. This isn't me. This truly isn't me pushing anything. You guys don't have to do this. But watch, right? If you have this stuff on your phone, right, and you're on the home page, right, you can go back here. You click ACT and SAT practice lessons, then scroll over to SAT. And all the most important stuff is available for free, right? The advanced stuff you can get into if you want to, but all of the most important things are free. So if you come in here and you do, right, to Spitty's point earlier, and you do just a little bit of reading, right? So you come in here, you do a quick practice passage. You can be doing this on your phone while you're standing in line, and you don't have to be carrying around a huge tutorial, right, with practice tests. But you can be doing this while you're standing in line waiting to go, waiting to go back, and your mind is then thinking about SAT problems instead of just thinking about how, getting in a fight with your friend about something, right, or talking about how badly you guys are going to do, right? I know the social anxiety that comes around with this stuff, and we have to try to avoid that. Okay, or if you prefer, if you don't want to think, if you've already had enough of thinking about reading, you can come in here, and this is what I encourage most students to do: go into the SAT and go into the SAT writing and language section. Right, and then just start doing some practice problems related to writing language, because that will give you an experience of reading things and thinking about grammar, while also giving you the ability to just focus on practice some grammar and warm up before the grammar test, which is section number 2. So again, I encourage you guys all to download that and create a free student account. It will be helpful for warming up on Saturday, but more importantly, it will be helpful for those grammar lessons when you get there for the writing and language test. Okay? But back to the reading section, okay? So back to the reading. Let's write this real quick. Okay. Okay, with the reading section, I can't tell you how critical I think this is. There are different ways to take this test, of course, right? And there's really 2 primary ways. There's either read the passages thoroughly, right? And then more importantly, going as a kind of subsidiary to this, is to then trust, right? Trust your reading. And then there's the skim, right? You skim, or you don't even read it all. Skim / don't read it all and go right to the question. Now, the issue with this, and this is huge, I cannot stress this enough, that phenomenal readers can get away with this. Okay, if you are a very, very strong reader, if you read multiple hours a day, you can get away with this. And those are the students that tend to have the most say in how to approach this section of the exam. The skimming method is why, because we've seen students at every level of the test, not just ones that have scored a 750 on the reading, writing, and language section, because we have a better idea than a really high-scoring student who may have used this method, which can work in certain situations. But because we've seen every level of student, 95% of the time, reading the passage thoroughly is going to work better. 95% of the time. And again, high-level readers can get away, but what we always say is if you're a high-level reader and you use this method, you could have just used this method, you just prefer one over the other, and you'd still have gotten a really good score. Either one would have worked at that level. And what we're trying to communicate is the best method for everybody generally, right? The best generic method. And that is to read the entire passage thoroughly. Because there's a couple major advantages for all of you on the reading section that don't necessarily apply to the other sections of the test. Namely, the scale is the most in your favor. The scale on the reading section is the most beneficial to students, meaning that you can miss more questions on reading than any other section of the test and still not go down as much as you would on the other sections. Okay, and that's a huge advantage if we're really thinking about the scale and how that works, that's a major advantage. So read the passages thoroughly. Okay, well, if we read the passages thoroughly, what does that do to our brain? If I told you guys that it's best to read the passages thoroughly, most of the time we get a response from students that is feeling like I'm going to run out of time, or I feel completely overwhelmed by this idea. Who's in that boat? Who's in that boat? How many of you guys feel that way? Probably some of you, right? So what we want to do is we want to recognize that this passage, right? Who's in the boat, right? Yeah, that's true. That's the upside to it, right? The upside to this, right? The upside to this is that you don't have to go back, and if you trust your reading, this isn't going to feel that overwhelming. Okay, but the key is that you have to trust your reading so that you don't go back to the passage as much. The other key to this is that you take breaks, probably. Okay, that you take breaks. Reading slowly is not a problem. Okay, and Jesse, let me show you this. Okay. Even if you read slowly, and this goes back to the point I was making about the scale in the reading section is most in your favor. All right, guys, take a look at this. If I pull up the scale in the reading section, it's extremely important that everybody recognizes this. You can miss a lot of questions and still do really well in the reading. Okay, so Jesse, give me an example if you wouldn't mind. Like, what would be your goal score on the reading, writing, and language out of 800? What would be your goal score? More than anything, everybody, is what I want to point out is if you want to get a 700, right? If you want to get a 700 on the RWL, roughly speaking, that means that you have to get a 350 on the reading section. Okay, can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to you? That if you want to get a 700 overall, roughly speaking, you could do a little bit better in reading. Okay, so Jesse, this is right. I'm hitting on all cylinders tonight. It seems like everything I'm saying is right along what you guys are thinking in terms of your goal scores and. So that you guys are right there, right? If you're looking for a 700 and you got to get a 350 on the reading section, everybody's always like, oh, that's such a good score. And it is such a good score, but what does that apply to? Take a look at this. If you need to get a 350 on the reading section, that's 45 out of 52 questions. 45 out of 52, and that's pretty consistent. The reading, right, is not, you can miss more questions. The scale is the most in your favor on the reading section. But watch this, guys. If I apply a proper guessing strategy, right, and I don't even do the last passage, everybody's always worried about reading slowly or getting fatigued and just running out of time on the last passage, and then you start to rush and start to get into that mode of like, I got to go too quickly. What happens if I were to tell you that you answer the first 41 questions right? This is passages, so 1 through 41 equals passages 1 through passage 4. And you can change the order if you want, but 41 questions. And then 41 through 52, right? That's 11 questions. That's passage number 5. Okay, if I got these first 41 questions right, then I'm sitting right now at 41 out of 52. But I haven't guessed, and the reading section is all in multiple choice, right? It's not like the math section. So let's go back, and let's try to pick out a proper reading guess, right? Guessing letter. What do you guys notice? If you look at the reading answer choices, right, on this test, and this is a great way to select your reading letter because you're going to have a bubble sheet in front of you, what do you guys notice about these answer choices? What do you guys notice? What do we notice? What's significant about the fact that there are 4 D's and 4 B's in this final passage? How would we know to guess that letter? How would it, let's say, whoever's Jesse, let's say you're trying to get a 700, right? You're trying to go for a 700, meaning you got to get a, roughly speaking, you got to get a 350 on the reading section. Okay, 41 out of 52, you struggle, but you get every single question right on 41. And then you guess every single question on the final passage. Guys, look how many times, right? There's 52 total questions and there's 4 answer choices each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, there's 10 answer choices. If we do 52 divided by 4, we get 13, right? Look how many B's there are in the last passage. Okay, look how many B's there are in the last passage. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means, right, that we have 14 B's. And look at D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That means we have 15 D's. Okay? See how many A's and C's we have. Okay? So we had 10 and 10, right? Up until the last passage, we had 10 and 10. If I look at A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so there's 11. If I look at D, or if I look at C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so again, if we look at this and we go back and we choose any of the letter choices that are not the most used, right? So A here was the most used. As long as you don't choose A, okay, as long as you don't choose answer choice A where there's only one in the final passage, you're going to pick up at least 2, and you're probably going to pick up more than that. If you get a little lucky, you're going to pick up more. But at the very least, if you answer the first 4 passages and maybe you take a break, right, you're going to take all of the time that you would have spent on the final passage. At minimum, you're going to get a 330, and at most, you get a 350. Right? There are 12 A's total, but up until the final passage, there were 11 of the 12 A's. There were the most answer choices, the most letter chosen up until the final passage was A, and of course, that was the one that showed up the least in the final passage, which is true. If you go back and you look at your bubble sheets on Saturday, and you've been accurate on the first 4 passages, and you just choose the letter bubble choice the bubble choice answer that's any of the 3 that are not the most chosen, you will pick up at least 2, and if you get a little lucky, you'll pick up 4 points, meaning that you're anywhere from 660, right, to 700, because right, or 330 to 350 on the reading section. Guys, I only bring this up not to say to skip the entire passage necessarily, but I bring this up to show you that it doesn't mean that you have to answer every passage and rush through it at the end. I would highly encourage everybody, even unless you're already scoring, as you know, whatever score it is on the reading section, I would encourage everybody to guess on 4 questions. Guess 4 questions on reading, and it can all be in the last passage. That's fine for reading. But if you were to get 50, if you get 48 out of 52, you're already at a 370, and you can skip 4 questions without rushing. If you get to the end of the if you get to the last passage and you're running low on time, do not rush to the last passage. Try to get 6 or 7 of those final questions right, and then just guess on the remaining questions. So you're not rushing on the 6 to 7, right? You're not rushing because you're taking the time that you would have rushed, and you're still just going at the same pace you've been going. That won't allow you to finish the test, but it will allow you to get those 6 or 7 accurately answered. And then you pick a guessing letter for the last 4, and your score is going to be in the 370, right, to 390 range. 370 guaranteed, 390 if you get a little bit lucky. Yeah, I wouldn't, Jesse. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't keep a running tally. In fact, in the last minute and a half of the test on Saturday, you're going to have a bubble sheet in front of you. So just look, glance quickly back. And if there's 2 answer choices that you're going back and forth between, maybe you count those 2 up. But just glance back at the rest of your test and say, okay, which of these has been used the least, or which one's not used very frequently, and choose that bubble choice as the one you're not going to guess. Any of the other 3, just fill that letter in the rest of the way down for any question that you don't get to, and I promise your score will go up. The biggest misconception about the SAT and the ACT is that timing is a factor at all. It is not. Timing is not a factor at all. And the reason that I say that, even though you guys are probably like, what is he talking about? Of course timing is a factor, right? This guy's an idiot. No, that's not the lesson here, right? The lesson is that timing is not a factor because timing doesn't really hurt your score that much. Rushing and being inaccurate does hurt your score, right? If you don't see the last 4 problems, but you get the first 48 right, man, that's not really affecting your score. That's taking you from a 400 to a 370. That's 30 points. That's still at such an elite level of testing at 370 by not rushing. And realistically, you're probably going to be closer to a 38 because you're going to guess the same letter down for the last 4 and you're going to get 1 of those right. Does that all make sense? Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up if that makes sense? Why I think reading, and then even if you have to take breaks in the middle of the test, meaning that you might not finish everything, you may not see 4 questions at the end, or even 10 questions at the end, Can everybody give me a thumbs up as to why that's going to leave you with way more accuracy as it applies to the reading section? Now, if you're already doing exceptionally well on the reading section, then don't listen to me, right? Because like I said at the very beginning of this on the reading test, there are many ways to take the reading section. And if you're already doing well with your own method, then don't listen to me. Don't change it just because I said so. That's something that used to drive me crazy about my own teachers when I was in high school. And then when I used to work for different companies before we started this, it drove me crazy that tutors and teachers would say, like, this is the only method that works. That's just not true. It's categorically, fundamentally untrue. So don't listen to that. Now, if somebody's offering you decent advice and you try it and it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. If somebody's offering you decent advice and you just ignore it, that's a problem. And that's not where you want to be. But there's a fine line between those two. Okay, so try it out. And again, if you've already tried your own strategy and it works exceptionally well, why in the world would you change that? Right? Stick with that. We've seen students do the skim method and it's worked for certain students, but it's far more consistent with reading the passage thoroughly. Okay? Does that all make sense, guys? Okay, the other thing that I want to mention about the reading test, and like I said, the reading section is so much about strategy because there really isn't a ton of content to review. Right? So the reading test is so much about strategy. Yeah, you got to find your method, guys. Absolutely. Yeah, if one of the passages ends up being difficult, right, you got to try your own strategy in this. I'm only communicating, and this is what I try to do in all of these live streams. I'm communicating based on numbers that we've seen from a general sample size. Now, there are outliers to everything, always, in statistics. So if there's a method that works well for you, stick with it. But the only way that you know it's going to work well is if you attempt it and you try it. And in the meantime, you got to take some of this advice in and say, maybe that does work. Maybe I need to try this where I don't finish the test, even if it makes me feel overwhelmed. I got to try it. And if I do it and my score goes up, why in the world would I try anything differently? Maybe I just need to get a little bit faster in my timing and add one more question, and then add one more. But at least I know I can stay consistent by answering as accurately as I possibly can. And that is absolutely critical. That's the critical part. All right? So the other thing that you guys want to be aware of is, of course, the order of the passages. Right? Number 1, 2, there's always 5 passages. And the other thing and I don't know if I would recommend this between now and Saturday just because it's quick. Right? It's a quick turnaround. But I will say that it might be beneficial for you guys to come up with the best passage order for yourself. So as most of you guys have mentioned already, this is the narrative literature passage. Number 1 is always that one. Number 4 is always the U.S. history, or 99% of the time. Technically, the SAT doesn't limit it to only these passages, but I'd say 99% of the time, this is the order. This is the natural science passage. Right? This is typically I think this one is usually the social science. Or vice versa for 2 and 3. This is like a humanities passage, typically like biography, something along those lines. Right? So one other thing that we can, I'd say that the reason I wrote these out, yeah, so if you create your own, right, we just want to give you as much information as we can throughout this process, guys. Because if we do that, then it's up to you to run with it, right? It's up to you to come up with a strategy that works best for you if you want to maximize your score. But we're providing the information, and then you guys have to work hard and take it, right? So in this order, right, this one, number 1, number 4, or number 5 tends to be somebody's least favorite passage. Very rarely do we see students not like passages 2 and 3, or at least not like them the most, right? The narrative, the U.S. history, and the natural science tend to be the ones that students like the least. Or on the flip side, some students really like these the most, especially number 1 and 5. Some students really like the narrative, and some students really like the natural science, right? Or they don't like those passages at all, and sometimes it's flip-flopped. If you love the narrative, you don't like the natural science. If you love the natural science, you don't like the narrative, right? And so the passage order is critical. If you don't like this one, right, or better yet, if you notice on your own testing, your practice testing, that you always do poorly on the narrative passage, then why in the world, right? Why in the world would we do narrative first, right? If the narrative is your worst passage, do all the other passages first, right? On the flip side, if narrative is your best passage, then that's a great one to start with, right? But that's all different from one student to the next. So you have to really track your own results and be thinking about, okay, where am I missing the majority of our questions? The beauty of this, guys, is that if you haven't seen these before, give me 1 second. We have created advanced score reports for every single section of the test. I mean, for like 10 tests rather. Okay, if you guys want to check this out. Okay, so those advanced score reports, for the ones that we have available, will not only they'll grade the test for you. Just plug in your answers to the Your Answer column. They're 100% free. Okay. Plug in your answers right to that answer, and then find out if you do that over the course of 3 tests, and one passage is clearly the one that you're missing the most questions. I highly encourage you guys to not do that passage come test day, or at least not do it to the very end. Okay, so again, I just encourage you guys to take a look at that if you have time. Okay, is that all cool? Okay, if you finish with extra time on the reading section, it's kind of tricky. I would say that you want to try to time it up so that you don't finish with extra time, because realistically, it wasn't that long ago that I was 16, 17 years old, right? Realistically, what are the chances that we're really going to go back and thoroughly look? The idea should be that we're taking the test as it comes to us, and we're trying to stay kind of carefree. For those that have watched our previous live streams, I have said this numerous times, but my biggest advantage on these tests is how little I actually cared, or not how little I cared, because that makes me sound how too cool for school I thought I was, which I was not, right? But the idea that I would just walk in and whatever happened happened. I didn't think about the next day, let alone college or what my future was going to look like. I just didn't think about it, right? I was just doing whatever, and just kind of going through life very complacently. And I wish I didn't do that. I regret it to this day, and that's something that I don't want you guys to fall into that trap. Now, having said that, on test day, that's a big advantage, because when you don't really care, even if you haven't put in the work, you go in with that free mind that we've been talking about since the beginning of the live stream. If you go in with a free mind and you're just in there to, hey, I'm just reading a passage today, and then I'm going to answer questions like I did when I was in the 4th grade. Right, the passage is a little bit harder, the questions are a little bit harder, but I'm also a little bit smarter than I was in the 4th grade, and I'm just doing the exact same thing I was doing then. Rather than, again, that's where we talked about the scales for as long as we did, rather than going in thinking, oh my God, if I don't get a 1500, then I'm not going to Harvard and my mom is going to hate me, and I'm, right? I know some of you guys deal with that, and I feel for you, because I know it's hard to overcome that thought process when you're in the middle of a stressful environment. That's kind of the first thing that we resort back to. And I don't want that for any of you guys. I want you guys to be as positive as possible that, hey, I can do this. I'm tired right now, but guess what? I can sleep after this. I got one more question because I know that's worth 10 points. And if you do that, you're going to be amazed at how much your score increases tomorrow or on Saturday. We're at 100 points. Yeah, so Spitty, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, is that I never tracked time, right? When I was a kid, when I took these tests, I did well by not tracking time, by not thinking about it. And that's where this whole strategy of having to skip or guess on questions at the end came into play, is because I would know that if I got 49 out of 52 questions right, because I was just there, I was taking it, I was present, I was looking, I was reading, I was trusting myself, I was trusting my reading, then if I got to question 49 and I answered all 49 of those, I had a very, very strong knowledge of the scale even at that age. For anybody that's watched our live streams, you guys will know I say this all the time, but the reason I had such a strong idea of the scale is because when I was in high school, I would do anything possible not to do as well as possible, but just not to let my grade slip from like a B- to a C+, so that I didn't get grounded and I could still go out that weekend. That was my only thought process. Was like, not how do I get the grade above and get, start to excel in my own life. It was, how do I get the minimum score so that I don't have to stay in this weekend. That's a horrible thought process for everything else in your life, But on a test like this, when you know that a 49 out of 52 on the reading section is still such an exceptionally strong score, in my mind, it wasn't about getting to a 1600. It was about, oh, I only have to get 48 questions to get to a 1500 to make that equivalent. That's like the best news in the world. You can still get an exceptionally high score and not have to do as much work. This is great news. And that's how I approached this test. And again, while this isn't a great strategy, I can tell you, when I turned 22, 23 and I realized that everybody else was working a lot harder than I was, it's hard to turn that work ethic on. But if you can go into just the moment of the test and have that mindset, I promise your score will go up. Yeah, so guys, I want you guys to be fired up about this. I want you to be. I love that. I don't want you to be lackadaisical. I want you to be fired up. Like, yeah, I got this. Not thinking about everything that could go wrong. You have plenty of time to worry in your life. Being an adult is worrisome in itself. Don't do that right now. Go in there and just say, look, I know I can get this many reading questions right. I'm not going to second guess myself. I'm going to just try it. If it doesn't work and Chase is an idiot, right? If that's the case, then that is what it is. But I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to do as much as I can to be focused for 49 questions, if that's what it takes, and not get to the 52nd question and guess on the last three. And guess what? If I do that, I'm going to get a 380 out of 400, and that's going to be the equivalent of a 1500 plus score. I promise if you guys can do that, your mindset is so important in this. If you guys really want to know, and I won't get into it too much, but that's why colleges still care about this test. The SAT and the ACT, for some good reasons, take a lot of criticism, and there are some reasonable elements to that criticism. But colleges don't care about the fact that you know how to do punctuation rules. I mean, geez, that's sixth grade grammar. What they want to see is who can sit through a 3-hour test. Because at Harvard, you're going to be sitting through a 3-hour test on a Saturday for your math final that all of the other students at Harvard have to take as well. And you're going to be graded on a scale just like this one against all of the other students at Harvard. That's why this test matters. You can argue about the content of the test all day long, and I wouldn't argue back with you. I could see a million different ways to make this test better from a content perspective. But there is nothing like sitting there for 3 hours and testing yourself on how focused you can be and just, can I do better? I used to thrive on that, and I'll leave it at that before we move on to the writing and language test. But I used to look at the student next to me, never met him, never met her, and I would just thrive on the idea that I was going to beat that person today. That was my goal. And as complacent as I was outside of these tests, when I was in the test, I was ready to go. Right? It was like sporting events, or I was in a musical when I was a kid too. And when I was in the musical, I was very present for that musical. And when I was out of it, I was not thinking about any of that. When I was in a sport, right? When I played sports, it was about what was going on in that game. And when I was taking a test, it's right there. How do I beat the kid sitting next to me that I've never met before? But if you envision that person being the one that's going to get a 1500 because they're going to do one more question, then hey, I'm not going to let that person beat me. I'm going to do one more question. Oh, look, they gave up. I'm going to do one more, so I beat them by 10 points. Boom, and now I'm where I want to be. If you can do that, if you can take that tweak in mindset, I promise that will work in extraordinary ways for you, and way more than any full content review can do that. Okay, because that ultimately, I know that from a personal experience, because while I absolutely did horribly in school, these tests always came relatively naturally because that was my mindset going into all of them. How do I get right? I'm not thinking about what the score is going to be because I didn't think about college. It was how do I get one more question right? So can everybody give me 2 thumbs up if that makes sense, and this whole idea for the reading test makes sense, that it is so much psychological about how do I prepare, how do I warm up before the test even starts, and then what do I need to do during the test to take a deep breath and let myself not be stressed, knowing that it's okay not to finish the test, and I can still score exceptionally well if I don't finish, but I'm accurate on all the other questions. That's the big takeaway. On top of that, guys, the most popular video on our channel, or one of the most popular videos that we've ever made, for anybody that's watched, for anybody that's tuning in tonight because of those real-time videos that you've seen on the channel before, our SAT reading video it was certainly over the last year is the most popular video we've ever made. So if you guys have a chance to watch this with the test in front of you, I highly encourage you to do this. Guys, it is hard to get into that state. Daniel, I don't disagree with you at all. It is hard. It takes practice. But it's that or not being in that state. Does that make sense, guys? I mean, the beauty of that is that it's binary. For anybody that's taken computer science classes, you know what binary is. Some of you that haven't taken that probably does too. But it's 0 or 1, right? We can either be in a state of, oh, I'm not going to do well in this, or what's my score going to be if I don't get this score, then I feel like a failure. Or hey, you know what? I'm just going into this, and there is a lot on this, but my life is going to be fine. I'm working really hard, and no matter what school I go to, no matter what scholarship I get, I'm going to work just as hard in college, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for me as I get out if I keep working like that. Okay? But if you guys ever want to watch this SAT reading real time, like I said, this is the most popular video on our channel over the last year. I encourage you guys to watch it and watch it with the test form in front of you. I think it's going to be really beneficial. And I think it just speaks to everything that I just went through in terms of how to approach this test on test day. Question on AP Calculus. I do recommend you take AP Calculus. Calculus is an extremely beneficial life skill or life subject. It really is, because it talks about efficiency and all that stuff. But you don't need to know calculus for this test. The SAT doesn't go anywhere close to calculus, but I do think that it's a good class to take. Okay? So any other questions, guys? Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up if this makes sense? No, Spitty, it's up to you. But sorry, real quick, because I didn't see that. If you're talking about doing work tomorrow, that is entirely up to the student. And I know that I'm giving you guys a lot of things that are up to you, but let me just give you an example of why I say that. If you're a type of student that is going to feel more anxious on test day because you did not do a test, you feel like tomorrow I got to do a practice section or I'm going to feel anxious on Saturday, then do a practice section. If you're the type of student that's going to sit there and it's going to drain you to do a practice section tomorrow, you feel like you've already done enough, then don't do a practice section tomorrow. Right? I wouldn't recommend doing any more than 1 practice test. And I'd really make sure that you limit it to that, and I'd really make sure to really think about it from a personal standpoint. Is this going to be beneficial or not beneficial for me and me alone as I look at Saturday's exam? Is that cool? All right, guys, so with that in mind, I'm going to move on to the reading section. Is that cool? I'm sorry, reading. I'm going to move on to the writing and language section. Everybody good with that? Can everybody say, can you guys give me 2 thumbs up in the chat or a good to go, whatever you guys want to say, but 2 thumbs up in the chat or a good to go if you're ready to move on to the writing and language section. Cool. All right, guys. So writing and language, as many of you guys know, is so much about okay. This is so much about grammar rules. I can't stress it enough. There's a couple ways to approach this. Okay. I'm going to list out the most important the most important grammar rules. And if there's anything that I would review in between now and Saturday, it would be these grammar rules. Okay, and really it goes maybe even beyond just grammar rules, but it's more talking about grammar rules in the context of this test. Okay, understanding when you're going to use certain grammar rules. Okay, so if you guys look at the writing and language section, there's 2 different types of questions. Right, out of 44 questions, there are 30 grammar questions. 30 grammar. And there's 14 what we call main idea in organization, right? Should the author add this? What order should these sentences be in? All that good stuff. Okay, of the 30 grammar questions, I cannot stress how important these 5 grammar rules are. And again, going back to the Star U app, I'll show you this in a second, but these 5 grammar rules, punctuation is number 1 by far. Of the 30 grammar questions, I swear that there are 8 questions on every single SAT that deal directly with punctuation rules. So that's always number 1. Number 2 is pronouns, right? And these next 4 can be in really any particular order. Apostrophes. Okay? These are all separate grammar rules. Verbs, and adjectives and adverbs, really, kind of. That's less important probably. Okay, but again, if you guys need to learn these or you need to review these grammar rules cannot be understated. There are so many of these questions, and if you know them and you can get those 30 questions right, grammar rules take, let's say conservatively they take 20 seconds. Right? If we multiply those out, that's 600 seconds. Right? That's 10 minutes. Which means, guys, that if you memorize every grammar rule and you focus on these 5 in particular, these 5 grammar, that's 10 minutes. That means that you have 25 minutes, right, for the remaining 14 questions on writing on main idea and organization. And those main idea and organization questions can also be exceptionally easy if you have enough time. If you don't and you're rushing through those, then it can be a little overwhelming. But 14 main idea questions can be answered in 25 minutes if you just take the time beforehand to memorize your grammar rules. Okay, so that is just very, very critical. There's not a ton of strategy on the writing and language section. There's really not, and there shouldn't be. It is just so, so important. It's so much about memorizing some simple grammar, 6th grade grammar rules, than it is about anything else. Because if you have enough time for those 14 questions, then you will have plenty of time if you do these exercises to memorize your rules. Then this test is a very, very easy section. Okay? And we'll go through a few questions just to give you guys an example. But going back to what I was talking about earlier with the app, right? If we look at that writing and language section, okay? So if we look at ACT and SAT practice lessons, right? And then we just switch over to SAT, and then you click SAT writing and language. For free, right? You guys can go through verb tense, subject verb agreement, pronouns, punctuation, right? You guys can go through everything that I just mentioned that are apostrophes and confused words, right? Here's all of the rules that we've ever seen, all of our tutors and teachers have ever seen related to apostrophes and confused words. You can do all of this stuff right in front of you, right? And again, we're trying to provide you with as many resources and as much information as we can related to this test, but ultimately then it's your job and your ability to run with that that's going to be so important. Okay, so those 5. Does anybody else have any questions about those 5 grammar rules? Those 5 sections of grammar. Any general questions related to grammar on the writing and language section before we move on to some of those main idea and organization questions? Yeah, good. So great question. So independent and dependent clauses. Let's go over that. Okay, because the easiest way to do it is this is the order. Well, let's go through this quick because it's really important. Here's one really cool trick, guys, related to punctuation. And like I said, punctuation is the most tested grammar section on the SAT by far. And it's true of every single SAT. We've never seen that change. And this is true of the ACT English section as well. They haven't changed that what seems like forever. The easiest way to test your grammar rules is to not focus on commas first. Okay, so here's the order. These are the 5 pieces of punctuation, with parentheses being like a maybe 6th, but I wouldn't worry about those too much. Right? Here are the 5 grammar rules, or punctuation rules. You should always test for a period first, then a semicolon if you see that in the answer choices. Okay? Then a colon, then a dash, and finally, last but not least, then you should try for a comma. And if you can stick to this, obviously if you don't see any of the first 4, then it's not going to be right. Then you just go to the comma, which is also tested. But watch this, right? In terms of whoever asked the question about perfectly a test for independent and dependent clauses, Well, right away, guys, if we see a period, that's the easiest. The reason we say start with that, who cares about answer choice D, right? Or answer choice A for the time being? Because commas have a million different uses, whereas a period has one use and one use only as it applies to the SAT. So let's see. Let's read on either side, right? Either side of this period, and let's see if there's two independent clauses, two full sentences that could otherwise stand on their own. It says, in the winter of 1968, scientists David Schindler and Greg Brunskill poured nitrates and phosphates into Lake 227, okay, which is one of the 58 freshwater bodies that compose Canada's remotely located experimental lakes area. So answer choice B doesn't work because by starting it this way on the second independent clause, can everybody see that if I start with which is one, then that is no longer an independent clause? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? So that one's eliminated. We're not even thinking about the comma rules yet. Okay, let's look at answer choice C. If I put in one of the 58 freshwater bodies that compose Canada's remotely located experimental lakes area, that's not a full sentence. That doesn't have a subject and a verb, so we can eliminate answer choice C. Okay, now we can go to the comma rules, and right away, guys, does everybody see that? Okay, right away with the comma. Now we do see there's your subject and a verb that we wanted for the period, but we've corrected it, and instead of using a period here, we've used a comma, and with that comma splice rule, right, we can't separate two full sentences with a comma, and because of these two words, this is one, right, this is, now that's two full sentences, and without even reading answer choice D, we know that's the right answer by default. Okay? So again, if you do this, if you start with these four, right, these first four, a period, a semicolon, and a colon, as it applies to the SAT. Now there are other grammar rules that apply to those forms of punctuation, but on the SAT, there's one rule for each of those and one rule only. For a period, it's independent clause or full sentence, right? An independent clause is just a full sentence. Independent clause, period, independent clause. For a semicolon, it's independent clause, semicolon, independent clause, right? For a colon, it's independent clause and then whatever. It doesn't matter what comes after this. Okay, you can. There's a million different things, and everybody's always concerned, right? Everybody's always concerned about the right side of the colon. This doesn't matter. I don't know if anybody knew this before, but as it applies to the SAT, whatever comes on the right side doesn't matter. The only thing you need to worry about regarding a colon is what comes on the left side, and is that a full sentence? That's it. That's all you have to know about a colon. If you do those things, sorry guys, my dog needed to be let out here. Okay, if you guys do those things, and you apply that, you'll get the colon question right every single time. Dashes have two uses. Okay, a dash can either be replacing a colon, so you can have a dash, right, with an independent clause out front, and then again, it doesn't matter what comes after the dash. Or you can have a dash that's like two commas with a phrase in between. So a dash holds two uses, right? These all have one rule for the SAT. This has two rules for the SAT, right? It can replace a colon in the sentence, or it can replace two commas in the sentence. Okay, right? Two dashes are just like two commas. They just have to be consistent. One comma, two commas, or one dash, two dash. Or it can serve the same place as a colon, but that's it. So basically, guys, to answer some of the hardest punctuation questions on the test, you only need to know 5 rules, right? 1 from each of the first 3 and 2 for the dash. And in this comma, you'd be amazed at how often the comma doesn't even come into play. That either it's got to be the right answer by default, like it was on number 1, or you don't have to know the rule because you've already gotten the right answer by using a semicolon or whatever it may be. Let's see if even on this test, right? This is test number 6. Let's see if we can find that. Yeah, look, we see right here. We're using this in their classes. Okay. Okay, so right away, guys, right? We see a period, so let's start with the period. And then we also we see in this one, we see a dash, and we see a period up here too with a colon. Okay, so let's see if that makes sense. I would imagine the period's going to work, right? Just weeks after the scientists added the nitrates and phosphates, the water in Lake 227 turned bright green. That's a full sentence. It was thick with the same type of algal bloom that had plagued Lake Erie. That's a full sentence, but we have this comma, we have this colon, and dash. Now, it should give you away right away that a dash and a colon can replace each other, so it should say that both of those need to be wrong, right? Because if they were both right, they would both be right, and you can't have two right answers on the test. If we look to the left of the colon, it was thick with, that's not a full sentence. Same thing here, right? It was thick with, that's not a full independent clause, so we can't have that be the right answer. And then lo and behold, we already know from the period test, right, from this test, or the semicolon, right, if you see that, we already know that there's a full sentence on the left side of the period or left side of the colon here for answer choice B. Without even reading the sentence again, you know the answer has to be B. It's not going to be the comma. So again, on answer choice D, everybody goes to the comma first. Every single student, and when we start these lessons, goes to the comma first. It's always like, what's the comma rule? But in reality, the comma doesn't matter at all because that's the one rule that's the least defined. Add 9. What's there? That should be one solution. Add 9, that should be one solution. X equals -1, right? There's only one -1. If you see that on the test. Does everybody see, guys, related, going back to the writing and language section here for a second, does everybody see this idea that this whole writing and language section, if you know your rules, is it because I am the Isaac Newton of grammar that I know this? No. This is 6th grade grammar. It really is. You learned a semicolon in 6th grade. Okay, you learned a semicolon in 6th grade. So that doesn't make me or you a genius if you get a perfect score on the writing and language section. It just makes, right? It just makes it that you are able to answer a lot of, right? That you put in the time to learn these strategies. Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up that you guys on Saturday, at the very least, you're going to learn these rules for punctuation, which you can do between now and Saturday? Right? Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up if this makes sense? And that's punctuation. I mean, guys, if you did that, if you just watch this, re-watch this video, that's 8 of the 44 questions on the writing and language test. There's 8 of the 44 just by knowing those things. And most importantly, right, probably even more important than that, is actually approaching it on Saturday by looking at 1, right, then 2, then 3, and so on and so forth, rather than immediately jumping to the comma, which is what everybody does. Because that's probably the one that we see the most in school writing. So that's what we feel like we need to jump to first, and that shouldn't be the case. Okay? All right, guys, everybody ready to move on to the math section? Everybody ready to move on to math? Any other questions related to writing and language? Again, I don't know if you can get it all done by Saturday, but you can definitely get it done on the writing and language test. If there's anything that I would recommend, it's to thoroughly review your grammar rules, and that can all be done within that Star U app. Right? If you create a free student account, it lists out literally all of the most important grammar rules right there. Okay, yeah. Oh, so yeah, guys. Sorry, I meant to go to that. Guys, if you get to a question like this, when you get to those main idea and organization questions, the most important thing, and you can see me, I've already done this with another student before, or another class, is to identify. Okay, it's to identify the most important words, right? The operative words, and when I say that, I'm not talking about the operative words in the paragraph or the passage. I'm talking about the operative words in the question. So as an example, everybody reads number 5, and they don't even think about the question. So when you see a question like number 5, right? When you see a word like question 5, which choice prevents the best transition from the previous paragraph to this one? Now that seems so elementary to go through, right? You guys are probably sitting there being like, yeah, I get that. But you'd be amazed, right? You'd be amazed at how many students don't think in that capacity during the test. Now I know you guys are looking at this now being like, yeah, that's all he's going to tell us for this. But when you actually get to the test, circling the things that you're supposed to be looking for, right? If we are looking for transitions from the previous paragraph to this one, we should probably know the main idea of the previous paragraph, however much we need to read from the previous paragraph, right? Previous paragraph, main idea, and then main idea of the new paragraph, and then apply the transition that includes both of those, right? It includes both main ideas. And so I can't stress enough, like on these tests, what I used to do, I don't have to do it anymore, but what I used to do is to circle the operative word, right? We kept looking for words like operative, right? The operative word. Because I know that if we can do that, these question types, especially if we give ourselves enough time by memorizing the grammar rules, these types of questions become very, very straightforward. Daniel, does that make sense? Are those the questions you were looking for? And that goes for every single type of question. It doesn't even just have to apply to that one, right? A transition question. At this point, the writer wants to add, right, a second policy outcome of the research described. Well, okay, if it's the research described, right? If it's the research described, we better understand the research as well as what a policy is, right? And understand how that works. So we got to add this sentence, and if the whole thing, right, then we have to go down and find the research and find what that policy outcome looks like. Does that make sense, guys? Are we all good on the writing and language section? And again, there's obviously more nuanced stuff that we can go through and discuss and talk about. But I want you guys to be aware of that. Oh, logical comparison. Yeah, far fewer than. Daniel, do you know if is that one of these on this test form? I know what you're talking about. That compared with. Well, yeah, if you're looking for a comparison question, like moreover, the training period for PAs is markedly shorter than the training period, right? Or those, right? I think I see what you're talking about here. I'm just not sure if it's like a illogical comparison if you're looking for those types of questions or if you're looking for an apostrophes and confused words. Daniel, just because we have to jump here in about 25 minutes. Daniel, if you do have questions, I'm happy to respond to those questions. But can you just make sure that you type can you type a question in the comment below this video? Just comment below this video with your specific question type if you wouldn't mind and post it. And I'll be sure, or one of our teachers will be sure to answer it just once we have a better understanding. I just want to make sure that we get to the math section first. I want to make sure we get to the math section before we run out of time here. Okay, so guys, real quick on the math section. If you guys look at this, geez, what in the world was I doing writing up in that big of font? Okay, if we look at the math section, has anybody seen any of our previous videos on the 3-pass method? Has anybody seen any of our videos on the 3-pass method? Any of these real-time videos on the 3-pass method, guys? I think it's really important to recognize one thing, okay? Recognize one thing on this test. And that's this. In big bold letters, and it's so true of the math section, every question is worth equal value. I would write that over and over and over again, like 50 million times if you can, because it is so true of the math section, and it's even more true if you don't like math. Okay, because one of the things that we see from students all the time is this ability to get stuck on one difficult question and let that affect the rest of their math test. I don't want to, again, I can't stress this enough that if you've seen some of our previous videos, right, we have what we call the Star Tutors 3-pass method, right, if anybody has seen this, with the idea being this, okay, that on pass number 1, right, you're literally going to go through the entire no calculator section, or it probably won't take you the whole no calculator section to do this. But on pass number 1, you guys are going to look for the 5 easiest questions that you could possibly see. So easiest possible questions, and you're looking for 5 of them. Easiest possible questions. And the reason this is so critical, and no word problems. No word problems on these first 5. No matter where they show up, even if it's number 2, and we know that's supposed to theoretically be easy, no word problems. Right? We're trying to go 5 for 5. 100% accuracy every time on these 5 questions. And there's no word problems because I don't want you to think about how you're feeling right now when it's Thursday. I want you to think about it in the terms of the real test at the real moment when you have to be taking that. And now all of a sudden you have to be, right? You have to be you've already completed 2 full sections of the test. I realize that question number 2, if it's a word problem, is probably not going to be very hard. But I can't stress enough how often we see students make simple mistakes on word problems early on in the math section, solely because you're not thinking about math, especially on the no calculator section. You've just done 52 questions, 65 minutes of reading, and then 44 questions and 35 minutes of grammar. The last thing on your mind when you start this, because there's no break between the writing and language and math no calculator sections, the last thing generally on your mind is thinking about math. So we got to look at these first 5 questions as complete warm-up questions. And I guarantee if you approach it this way, right, as you can see right here, I was writing this already, the first question is a long word problem. Think about that in the capacity, right? Think about that in the capacity of where you're going to be taking the real test. Whereas if you know how to do this question, right, if complex numbers don't throw you off, the sum of complex numbers 2 plus 3i and 4 plus 8i is equal to what? We know that that doesn't apply necessarily unless we get I squared. We just get 6 plus 11i. I mean, how little thought, if we know how to do, if we know how to do complex number questions, how little thought did we have on that? Does everybody see the difference between that question and question number 1? Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up, guys, if you guys see the difference between that question and question number 1? That this question number 3 is a first pass question, pass 1, because it is so straightforward in thinking, right? What is the sum of the complex numbers? Well, we just have to add those up. And I, in this case, is just like the variable x. Nothing changes. If I skip number 4, 4 is kind of on the fence. You could maybe do number 4 if you really like factoring. It's a really easy question. But if you skip 4, how easy? I mean, think about this, guys. This is the test that people take to get into Harvard. And this is asking about y equals mx plus b at number 5. Even if you hate math, that is not a hard concept. It's just not. Even if you hate math. Everybody covers y equals mx plus b in school, and it's covered ad nauseum, right? It's just covered constantly, right? We know -5, right away we know -5 is the y-intercept. And we know positive 2 is the slope. Without any thought at all, we know the answer has to be D. And now we're 2 for 2. We probably, if we did this correctly, if we did this pass strategy correctly, it would honestly probably take us like 20 seconds to do question number 3 and question number 5. And now we're moving on with 100%, again, sorry guys, right, with 100% accuracy and 100% momentum. If x is equal to 2/3 y and y equals 18, what is this? This is just the most basic algebra problem. Even though it's number 6, this question is going to be easier than question number 1, I guarantee it. Right? Because we don't have to think about it. It's just basic math. X equals 2/3 times 18, right? X then would equal 12. 2 times 12 minus 3, 24 minus 3. That question is not very difficult, right? That is not a question that we have to get ourselves overwhelmed with. The table above shows which of the following functions, if you know tables, right? If you know tables and functions, wx plus tx is equal to x. So again, which of these two added together, right, is equal to this one? No. Oh, yep, there we go. Right? 3 plus -1 is equal to 2. So it's got to be for which value of x? It's when x is equal to b. Does everybody see that, guys? Okay, guys. So the point of pass number 1. Look at one more because this is right. The point of this is that when we get the square root of x plus the square root of 9, which is just 3, is equal to the square root of 64, which is 8. The square root of x is equal to 5. X is equal to 25. Is there any reason to do this? This is at number 9. You have no idea when you start the test on Saturday where the easy questions are going to come, but more importantly, where the non-time consuming questions are going to come. So you have to find these 5 out of 5. How easy were those questions? I mean, talk about getting off to a good start. Can everybody give me 2 thumbs up if you guys understand the importance of this first pass, maintaining 100% accuracy, and finding not the first five questions, but rather the 5 questions that are the most straightforward, that you look at it and you're just like, wait, that can't be that easy. And you're like, yeah, it is actually that easy. And you do those problems first. Okay? Because there are 10 questions on this test that even if you hate math, you will know how to do those 10 questions if you do some basic math review. Okay? Then pass number 2, right? Pass number 2, we're going back to that scale that we talked about. So let's say you wanted to get a 650, right? You want to get a 650 on the math section. Okay, 650 on the math section we said was equal to 43 out of 58, if you guys remember that from the first part of the video. Of the 58 questions, 20 of those, so 1/3 of those questions were on the no calculator section. So we just take 43, right? 43 times 1/3, right? 43 times 1/3, and we get roughly, it's 14. That means, guys, in order to get 650 on the math section, we have to keep up with a 14 out of, think about that, 14 out of 20 in order to get a 650 on the math section, which would put you in the top 10% of all students that take this test. You only have to get 14 out of 20. That's a C- in school. That's a 90% on the SAT. We got to find 9 more questions, right? We got to find 9 more because we're already 5 for 5. And now with whatever time remaining, we have to find 9 more questions on pass number 2. Now we're going to go find the 9 easiest questions. And the beauty of all this is that for any multiple choice, the third pass, right? The beauty of all this, and there's more, it's Billy Mays, right? It's an infomercial, and there's more. The beauty of all this is on pass number 3, we can guess on any remaining multiple choice. Guess multiple choice. Right? So realistically, if we have 4 multiple choice left, we're probably going to pick up another point here, which means that we can realistically only get 13 right down here if we want, or if we get 14 right, then we have a little bit higher score than a 650. But I promise you, if you work on this method, because it is mathematically factual based, it is not me just guessing on this stuff, being like, I think this will work. On the reading section, I told you that if you skimmed, if you found a method that worked for you, it's great, right? And do that method. But everything I'm telling you right now in the math section is factually based. That every question is worth the same value, but not every question is equal value in terms of difficulty. And so it's your job to find if your goal is to get a 650 on the math section, you find the 14 easiest questions that you can find before ever looking or thinking or losing train of thought or losing momentum on any difficult question. There's zero reason for it. Doing the SAT math sections in order, like in going 1, 2, 3, 4, is mathematically very inefficient. from pure objective mathematical standpoint. We can't do this test in order. We cannot if we want to maximize our score. Because, again, quite frankly, question number 9 was one of the, question number 5, right? Think about what could happen if we let one of the early questions, for whatever reason, it threw us off and we were struggling with it. And we kept thinking, man, this one should be easy, but it's not. Why is it not? And then we make a simple mistake on question number 5 for one reason or another, solely because we lost all of our momentum. That is just a killer on this test, that we can't let that happen. And that, again, I want you guys to be continuing to be familiar with that, because the math section is the one section that's in order of difficulty, but in reality it's not. It might be as a group, like questions 11 through 15 are going to be harder on the no calculator section for sure as a group, but that doesn't mean every one of those 5 is going to be harder. Okay? As an example, right? Looking at this question here. If you've already taken Algebra 2 and you loved Algebra 2 class, right, we're looking at something that's -A. So right away, we know that this is question number 11. It's supposed to be a level 3 question, but if we just covered this in our functions Algebra 2 class, right away the graph is going to open downward. So it's not going to open upward. It's not going to open upward. Without doing anything and without really even reading the problem, we know that we can eliminate 2 answer choices. And then if this is a negative inside, it's going to be a positive B. If it's a positive outside, which is such a goofy rule, but it is mathematically based, it's going to be a positive C. So the answer is just B there. Now again, that's not going to apply to everybody. That's not going to be a really easy question for everybody if you don't remember that from Algebra 2 class, but you can learn it. And if it is something you remember, it is an exceptionally easy question, even though it's labeled by the SAT at number 11. It's what we call a rules-based question, rules-based at number 11. And anytime a question is rules-based, it's very easy because it's a hard concept, right? It's a concept that not every student is going to know, but if you do know it, it's going to be extremely easy to do. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? A thumbs up if by objectively mathematically speaking, you guys understand the importance of skipping questions. The one thing I will say is that this pass method that we have up here, I truly believe in it and stick by it. I've seen enough students personally as a teacher and a tutor that I know it works. I like the structure of this, but ultimately the goal of the method is just to find the 14 easiest questions that you know how to do if you're trying to get to a 650. Okay, that is the most important thing. Guys, if you're looking for the next live stream, there's 2 things on that note. This is going to be posted immediately after we're done. This is posted as a recorded video. All of the comprehensive reviews are always posted. If you guys are interested, and I'm only answering this, we're doing this new thing where we have a membership, we're a YouTube partner now, which is pretty exciting, and it's a really contribution to all of you guys for helping us get there. But we've started this new thing where we're doing a membership live stream once a week. If you guys are interested, the membership is $3 a month, and you can click the join button below. But our next technical live stream is tomorrow. It's for the members of the YouTube channel only for that one. But it's just a hype video. It's just a hype video trying to get you guys pumped up for Saturday. But all of the comprehensive reviews that we do, these will always be free. But if you're looking for maybe a little bit extra, a little bit of something more, then we'll always be doing one more live stream that's related specifically to those memberships. So, and then here's the... And again, if you guys are interested in joining as a member, no pressure at all. You guys can click the join button below this video, and that will give you access to the remaining live streams that we have that are related to members only. Otherwise, we're going to be doing comprehensive reviews before every SAT exam, before every ACT exam, so that you guys will, and those are going to be free always. That's not going to be a membership thing, but we'll be doing some extra stuff with that. The next technical live stream again is tomorrow, but that will be for the members of the channel. And then the next full live stream will be sometime next week. So look out for that as well, guys. Okay. Did anybody have any other questions related to the math test? Oh, wait. Somebody asked about certain questions. Yes. 4 and 7. Yeah, question number 4. So, 4, guys, just remember that if you just distribute, anytime they give you constants like this, just distribute it out, right? Because here we get p squared times x squared plus ptx minus ptx, right? If we just FOIL this whole thing out, minus t squared. And all of a sudden, right, those cancel. We get p squared times x squared minus t squared, right? And then it becomes very easy to see that the 4, right, is related to the p squared, because it's formatted like this: 4x squared minus 9 is equal to px squared. And so this 4 just corresponds to the p squared, so p is just equal to 2. Okay. And then number 7, this question was 7. A bricklayer uses this formula. And guys, if you have any other questions, because like I said, we're going to be done here in about 5 minutes. And this will all be posted as a recorded video as soon as we're done. The next question here, a bricklayer uses the formula N equals 7LH to estimate the number of bricks N needed to build a wall. Yeah, following terms, guys. So anytime you see this, the following terms, which of these lists the following terms, all you're doing is you're doing basic algebra to get one letter, one variable on one side of the equation. And usually they give it to you. But if you say correctly in terms of, whatever variable is first listed, that's the equal sign. So it's going to be L. Even if they don't give you L equals like they do in this problem, they just give you like 7NH as the answer choice. It's just L equals 7NH anytime you see in terms of, and you're dealing with variables. And in this case, then you just get N equals 7LH. You divide by 7H on both sides, because then that cancels, right? And you're left with just L on one side. Divide by 7H. And you get L is equal to N over 7H. Cool? What's that? L equals N over 7H. The answer is C. All right? Any other questions, guys? Everybody feel good? So in addition to joining, one more thing here, guys. If anyone's interested, all of our real-time videos, if you saw this live stream and you found our channel through our real-time videos, every single one of our SAT real-time videos where we take these tests in real time is listed in the description below this live stream video. So if you guys want to check that out, please do. But every single one of those is listed in the live stream description below this video. Okay, so okay, so again, if you guys are interested in those, check those out. Any difficult questions in this section? One thing I would say, guys, is for tomorrow, if you're interested in this for Saturday, the word equivalent means you can always plug in a number. Did everybody know that? If you ever see the word equivalent, and there's probably 4 or 5 questions per SAT exam, watch what happens. If I plug in x is equal to 3, right, and you're assuming you want to make sure that you're pretty good at basic math. But if I plug in x equals 3 to this expression up here, and I see the word equivalent, I get 4 times 9, right? 3 squared plus 6 times 3 over 4 times 3 plus 2, right? And so I get 36 plus 18 is equal to 54 on top. I get 12 plus 2 is equal to 14. Divide both of those by 2, I get 27 over 7. Right? And 27 obviously doesn't go 7 doesn't go into 27 perfectly. So guys, right away, right, if I'm going to plug in x equals 3, right, I'm saying that this value when I plug in x equals 3 is equal to 27 over 7. And because I see this word equivalent, okay, I know that I have to find my answer choice that's also going to give me 27 over 7, and that's a fraction, so I know it's not A or B. I also know, right, 27 over 7 is like 3, no, it's like almost 4, right? It's almost 4. If I plug in 3 plus 1 here, okay, that's already going to give me something above 4. If I plug in 3 minus this value, it's going to give me something below 3, so it's got to be answer choice D. Otherwise, the number is going to be too small. That's just something to deal with equivalent, the word equivalent. If you guys see that on the test and you're not sure how to solve a problem, anytime you see the word equivalent, you can always plug in a number and solve it using kind of a picking numbers trick. Other than that, though, guys, I can't think of anything. If there's a mixture problem, that might be something to cover. If you guys see a mixture problem, you always set up mixture problems like number 19. This is test 6. How many liters of a 0.25% saline solution must be added? 0.25 saline solution must be added to 3 liters of a 10% saline solution to obtain a 15% saline solution. So this would be 0.25x of a 10%. How many liters of a 0.25x plus 0.33 liters, right? 0.3 times 10% is equal to 0.15 x. Did I set it up? T. Right, x is the number of liters that you've added. I'm missing something here, guys. My brain is fried. But in any case, look, we have a mixture select section. My brain's fried, but yeah, that's how you basically set it up. You're going to set it up as a problem where you have to solve. It's basically some systems of equations problem. You're solving for a variable. But in any case, guys, I got to run here. I'm sorry that that we didn't have time to go through more math stuff, but hopefully this all helped. We'd really love to see you guys on more live streams going forward. This is going to be posted to our channel for free forever. If you guys want to check out the video again and rewatch before Saturday's test, I encourage you guys to hopefully participate in the hype video live stream tomorrow. Oh, thank you, Veronica. You're right. That's exactly what it should be. 15.15 to 0.1, right? Oh, no, 0.15 times x plus 3. You got it. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so that's how you solve for it. All right, and then you just solve from there. Veronica, you've been silent for a bit, but I appreciate you jumping in and helping me there. Yep, that's exactly right. And then you just solve from there for x. That's the number of liters needed for the solution. It's a little bit tricky. If you see a solution problem, this should always be a pass 2 or pass 3 question, guys. Always be a pass 2 or pass 3 question, no matter what. Because if it's pass 2, it means you know how to solve for it. But there's so many ways to make a simple mistake on a question like number 19. Simple mistakes galore that we want to try to avoid. So just watch out for these. But that's how you'd solve for it. Yeah, and again, hopefully, guys, this all helped you. I really like making these videos, and if you guys could help us spread the word, we want to try to help as many students as we possibly can. That's honestly why we came up with this membership idea, is to hopefully make it not cost prohibitive for anybody, but still help us get the word out and make it so that we can do this full time and make more videos like this, more free videos like this, so everybody can participate and everybody can get better. That's our ultimate goal here. So again, guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope that you guys do phenomenally well on Saturday. If you watch the first 30 minutes of this video again, and you remember that you're looking for a number of questions correctly, not for a score, the score will take care of itself. If you approach it as number of questions correctly, right, answered correctly and accurately, then the score will take care of itself. So then you go into the test with a task. You're thinking, if I want to get a 650 on the math section, I got to get 43 out of these total 58 questions right. That's task-oriented rather than thinking, I'm tired. If I don't get this score, I'm a failure. I don't want to go see my parents because they'll think I'm a failure. I'm not going to get into XYZ school. That's not task-oriented. That's a worrisome mind. That's worry, right? That's not what we want. We want to instead be thinking about, how do I find those 43 questions? I'm not going to stop till I find 43 out of 58, and then I'm done, and I know what I can get. But until that point, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to get. I'm thinking about I'm thinking about what am I doing, not how am I doing. All right, guys. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your night or morning, wherever you guys are in the world. You guys have been great, as you always are. Help us spread the word. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Otherwise, we'll see you guys for the next live stream. And more than anything, good luck on your test on Saturday, guys. You're going to do great. I know it. All right? We'll talk to you guys soon.